Somehow ambition has gotten a bad rap. It's almost like it's not cool to be ambitious, but it's cool to be really lackadaisical and chill. I actually think it is cool to be ambitious. I want to talk about that for a few minutes because it's dramatically shaped who I surround myself with and the kind of things I choose to do. Right? I remember when I was in high school, I was in some of these honors classes, and then once in a while we had to take an elective class. And one of my classes was photo. So I really loved photo. I loved taking pictures, etc. And I went to this photo class and nobody did any work whatsoever, okay? People were reading magazines. It was crazy. And I thought to myself, well, whatever, like I'm gonna do a good job. I like taking pictures. Let's just see how it goes. I think in the back of my head, I was like, I know, I'll be the Pied Piper and I'll bring everybody up so we'll all take better photos together. That did not happen. Instead, what I ended up doing was I sat 4 days a week and read magazines with my feet on the table. And then on the 5th day, I went into the darkroom and developed my photos. In other words, I got dragged down instead of bringing everybody else up. And I have found that to be very, very true. If you are around other people who think it's weird or who stigmatize being ambitious, chances are it's going to rub off on you. Now, I remember my parents always saying these little phrases that I really didn't know where they came from or what they meant, but they ended up having a huge impact on me, right? So one thing my parents would say is, why don't you just write it up? I'd have an idea, or I'd be telling them something I did online or a joke, and they'd say, why don't you just write it up? Send it to the newspaper. My parents aren't writers. I don't know where they came up with that, but it ended up changing the way I thought about myself. I started thinking, hey, I have something that people might want to hear. Why don't I just write it up? And I did. And I got published a couple times in a teeny little section for teens in the Sacramento Bee. And it felt great. Another thing they said to me was, a year from now, you're going to be a year older. What are you going to do? That has stuck with me until now. In other words, time is going to go on no matter what. So a year from now, where do you want to be? Looking back, if you had started something a year ago or 2 years ago, where would you be today? Right? It's not too late to start. So I want to talk about how to be ambitious. There are a few things that have worked out really well for me that I want to share with you. The first is to surround yourself with ambitious people. Now, it can be weird if you're the only one in your city reading self-development books or going to a self-development seminar. They're like, why are you such a weirdo? And I recently interviewed my friend Michael Ellsberg, and one of the things he said is, yeah, I am a weirdo. I like doing this stuff. It's weird. So if you like that, it's totally cool. And if not, no problem. What I used to do was to get really defensive. Oh, you don't understand. Da 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 da. It's so interesting. If you only signed up, if you only understood, then you would come along. Well, the fact is, most people don't want to do that. That's fine. In fact, they actually get inspired by someone who is ambitious. It's almost like this backwards bending curve. At first, it's really uncool to be ambitious. And then when you cross a certain threshold, people look at you aspirationally. Wow, how'd he do that? He must be lucky. I didn't go to that college, so I can't do that. When the fact of the matter is, you started off way long ago being ambitious on the most micro of tasks. Step number one in becoming ambitious is to surround yourself with people who are ambitious or who accept that you're ambitious. Now, you can do this online. I have my own programs that surround you with ambitious people. You can find other people in online forums. You can do this offline by going to community groups or meetups. There are tons of other people who actually think it is cool to be ambitious. And the first time you ever go and you encounter these people, it's like, I found someone who understands me. So that's number one. Number two is to actually read interesting material that challenges you to become more ambitious. So you read my material, I don't need to belabor that point. A lot of my readers also read Tim Ferriss's stuff. You also have things like Cal Newport's material. These are all great, great materials that will challenge you to be better than you ever thought you could be yourself. The next one is to set big goals each year. You know, it's funny, I hear people, they'll set goals, they'll say something like, I have this web app and it has 1,000 users, and by the end of the year, I want to have 1,300 users. And I'm like, that's it? Your entire goal is to go from 1,000 free users to 1,300? Where a top performer would say, you know what, I want to make that 5,000. Now, they wouldn't just arbitrarily set that. They would say, here's what it's going to take in order to quintuple my user base. But they would set ambitious goals. The fact of the matter is, so many of us set these very tepid goals because we're afraid of committing to something bigger, because what if we fail? We've dealt with failure in this program. So knowing that and knowing how to set effective goals means you can actually afford to be ambitious. So instead of saying, I'm going to run on the treadmill for 18 minutes, you can say, you know what, I'm going to do it for 45. Or I'm going to lift this much based on research of how long it takes to lift that much, or to earn that much, or to find a dream job. And the fourth thing about how to be ambitious is actually a very tactical maneuver. A lot of times when you start doing these things, you're going to encounter some resistance. Could be from your friends, could be from your family. Okay? One technique you can use is to simply work on these things in secret at first. Your first week or couple of months is a very tumultuous time. It's a very trying time because you're already not confident about it yourself. I don't know, should I be reading this stuff? Am I getting scammed? And then if your friends hear about it and they think it's really weird, what are they going to say? Hey man, you're paying $1,000 for an online course? That seems like a scam. And already in your weekend unconfident state, it's going to be very difficult for you to defend yourself. So one thing I did, especially starting off, was to simply work on these things in secret. I wouldn't tell anyone because I wasn't confident enough to marshal responses to anyone arguing with me. So I would just kind of do it on my own. I'd read these books quietly. I would not make a big deal about it. I wouldn't even bring it up. If someone said, what are you up to? I'd say, I don't know, I'm just reading a few books right now. But I wouldn't get into the nitty-gritty because I wasn't ready to defend myself about it. Over time, I've gotten way more confident in self-development, knowing that, you know what, it's cool. If you don't think that relationship seminars or career seminars or personal development seminars are cool, that's totally cool. I know it's worked for me. I know it's worked for a few of my friends. I have a good time. And I also use this technique where I say, you know what, I don't know if this is going to work. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I figure, why not give it a shot, right? Can't hurt. What would you do if you were me? That totally co-opts their anger or their criticism and brings them into the process. Because you have to remember why people argue with you when you start to become more ambitious. For most people, it reflects on them that they are not being as ambitious as you are. Now, I have a few action steps for you in this section. I want you to first think about 3 ambitious people you know. They could be authors, they could be chefs, it could be people who work out really well, it could be whoever you want. What are your impressions of them? What words would you use to describe them? Notice those words, write them down. Are they positive or are they negative? If they're negative, I want you to acknowledge those invisible scripts right away. For example, think about someone who is really successful at their career. If your first invisible script words are works too hard, has no time for family, no balance, if that's what you think an ambitious person is, then there's no reason you would ever become ambitious, right? So I had to go through this myself, and I see this a lot as I read online comments. There'll be a profile of someone who's really successful, and the first 100 comments will say, well, obviously he has no work-life balance. Obviously he does nothing else. Why? Their invisible script is ambitious or successful is bad. And for those people, they will never become ambitious, and chances are they may not become as successful as other people because they believe that to become ambitious or successful is bad and evil. I want you to acknowledge and I want you to exterminate those invisible scripts. The next thing I want you to do is ask yourself, am I surrounding myself with positive people? All right? Who are 3 people that not only support what you do, but actually are interested in self-development themselves? For a lot of us, we don't have anyone like this at all. I know when I was growing up, I actually had no one that was interested in self-development. It didn't really even exist as far as I was concerned in my social network. And yet, as I got older, I started to meet people who would read self-help books, who didn't think it was weird to be improving themselves on a financial perspective or a health perspective or a relationship or career perspective. They actually embraced it. Do you have those people? If not, take the what if I were perfect technique and ask yourself, where could I find these people? Could it be online? Could it be in a program? Could it be offline at a meetup? Where can you find these people in the next 14 days? That's what I want you to ask yourself. Third, I want you to ask yourself, what material am I reading that is going to improve my own self-development in becoming more ambitious? Could be inspirational books, could be tactical books, could be profiles and biographies of successful people. It's okay to read these, and I want to encourage you to do so. Again, in the next 14 days. What's one amazing book or article that you could read to become more ambitious? I challenge you to do that. And I want to wrap with one final point. Remember when I talked about that backwards bending curve? How when you first start off doing these ambitious seeming things, it can actually be a little weird and disconcerting to people around you. But the end of that curve means people actually are more and more attracted to you. In other words, people want to see ambitious people. They want to hang around them. It's okay. Not only is it okay, it's cool to be ambitious. The only time you're in this trough of failure, in this very dangerous point, is when you first start off. So acknowledge that. Know that it might affect friends and family around you in a little bit of an odd way because they're not used to seeing this. But when you do it, when you become successful at becoming more ambitious, when you truly internalize that being ambitious is cool and that it can help you achieve your goals much faster than waiting around for the world to deliver them to you, that's when you know that you've become successful. So these principles and these action steps for becoming more ambitious have dramatically affected the way that I thought about myself and the way that I pursued big, big goals. I challenge you to do that. If I asked you, what percentage of your income do you invest back in yourself? What would you say? I recently saw this conversation going on Facebook. Somebody said, what percentage of my income should I invest back in myself? And people had wildly differing answers. Some said 3%, some said 80%. What would you say? For me, investing in myself has been one of the best investments, if not the best investment I've ever made. I want to talk about how I think about investing in myself and how you can begin to accelerate your investments in yourself as well. So I think back to one of my friends who had a company. It was an online company, and we went out to coffee a few years ago. It was like, Ramit, I'm thinking of productizing some things. He wanted to do some online courses like I had done. And I said, sure, here's what you need to know. And we chatted for coffee. He's a buddy of mine. And he said, would you be potentially interested in helping us out? And I said, sure, if you want to do like just random advice, I'd be happy to give it to you. If you want to do something more formal, like a consulting arrangement, I can certainly help you with that. And he said, I think we'd be interested in a consulting arrangement. Can you send over a proposal? I said, sure. I sent him over a one-page proposal, and he needed about 5 to 10 hours of consulting. And at that time, my consulting rate was $1,200 an hour. So the project was around $6,000 to $10,000. In the grand scheme, running a business with a potential product that would generate several $100,000, $6,000 is not that much. And to me, it wasn't that much either. Usually, I wasn't even doing consulting at that time, but he was a friend. Emails had been going back and forth very quickly until I sent over that proposal, and it became real for him. Real that he was going to actually have to put money down in order to make this thing a reality. And at that point, he backed away. He said, that's a little bit out of my budget. And I said, sure, that's no problem at all. Let me know if you change your mind. About 9 months later, I noticed that they had actually released a product on their site. They had done a number of things wrong, things that I would have immediately corrected because I made those very same mistakes when I launched my first few products too. And those mistakes cost them dearly. In fact, in just one mistake that they made cost them 90% of potential opt-ins. In other words, potential customers. Try that again. In one mistake they made, just one step, they lost 90% of their potential customers. So, of course, I didn't say anything. But what I thought to myself was, this is so interesting. The price of paying $6,000 to $10,000 was too painful. And yet, I modeled out some basic numbers to try to figure out how much they had done. I had some reasonably accurate information. I estimated that they lost $200,000. Think about that. They were too hesitant to pay $6,000 to $10,000, and instead they invisibly lost $200,000. How much are you invisibly losing by not investing in yourself? I want to talk about how I think about this and what you can do today. For most of us, the most typical investments in ourselves are books, conferences, even taking people out to coffee. If you just do those things alone, you're ahead of the game. Now, I'm not saying go out and spend money willy-nilly. You don't have to spend $50,000. Be smart about it, and I'll teach you how to do that. But I am saying investing in yourself is one of the best ROIs you can ever get. I want to talk about some of the resistance that you will encounter when you first start having to invest beyond a $10 book. For most of us, a $10 book is no big deal. But as I illustrated with my friend, who was really interested and he knew that I could help him out, until he saw the price, many of us do the same thing as well. In theory, we'll say, yeah, I definitely know I need to meet a lot of interesting people. And yet, if we find someone who's on the other side of the country, and I say to one of my students, why don't you just fly out there and meet him? You clearly have enough money because I know how much they make. Whoa. You're saying I have to spend $400 to fly out to take this guy to coffee? So all of a sudden, our theory becomes reality and we back away. Let me talk to you about some of the barriers that we encounter as it comes to investing in ourselves, because we will all go through these. The first one is, I can do this by myself. Why do I need to buy a $2,000 course? I can learn this stuff on my own. And my answer to that is, you should. You should absolutely try to do it on your own. But give yourself a time limit. So for example, let's say someone's trying to lose 25 pounds and they want to do it in 9 months. Very reasonable goal. You should absolutely do that. You should say, you know what? I'm going to set a goal of 25 pounds in 9 months. But at 3 months, I should have lost around 8 pounds. At 6 months, I should have lost around 16 pounds. If I'm not hitting my milestones, then I'm going to do something else. I'm going to change what I'm doing and try something else. That could be changing the program you're on, could be going to a different gym, or it could be hiring a trainer. That makes a lot of sense if your goal is to lose X pounds by Y date. Many of us say, I can do this on our own, and then we don't do it at all. I hear this all the time when it comes to people joining my Earn 1K program. They say, well, why am I going to pay that much money? I can just do this on my own. And I say, please try. I want you to do it on your own. I hope my free material can help you. Check back with me in 6 months. Now, very few of those people ever check back, but sometimes I actually proactively go out and say, hey, notice that you didn't join. You mentioned that you want to do this on your own. How's it going? Almost invariably, they will say, well, I got really busy at work and then something else happened, and so I haven't really gotten around to it. Now, that's fine. Life happens. But if your goal is to earn $1,000 a month, and if it's not working for you on your own, it may be time to consider investing in yourself. That can be investing in a course, a coach, whatever it may be. The other barrier that we have is, how do I know this is going to work for me? This is one of the classic ones in self-development. We say, I don't know, this course seems good, but how do I know it will work for my unique situation? I live in Alaska. I went to this school. I'm this racial denomination. I'm this certain race, or I'm this religion. The fact is, you're not a special snowflake. I want to emphasize this because it is so important. Most of us are very similar in the things we do. For example, if you've ever read my copy, you might have said, how did this guy know that I was thinking that? That's not because I'm magical or naturally intuitive. It's because I researched tens of thousands of people. And by the end, I see these patterns that are held in all of us, right? So most of us are very similar for about 90% of us. And then we have these few unique things about us. Do not think that you are so different from everyone else. I once was watching Dr. Phil because I have the TV watching tastes of a 40-year-old woman. And he had this really interesting exercise. He said, just adopt my perspective for 15 minutes. So let's say you're arguing with someone, you just don't agree with them at all. He said, you know what? Believe me for 15 minutes, just 15 minutes. And I adopted that viewpoint. And it was like, wow, if I'm arguing with someone and I just listen to them and I put all my defenses down for 15 minutes, that actually can often dramatically change the way I think about the argument. The same thing is true here. Imagine that this program would actually work for you. that yes, you are unique in a few areas, but for the most part, we are very similar to each other. And this program would help you with that 90%. Now know that you will never be spoon-fed everything. A course will never be created specifically for you, where you live, your age, your race, your background, your education, unless you hire an individual coach, which is very expensive. Instead, say to yourself, you know what, I'm smart enough to be able to discern what's right for me and to discard part of what's not. I do the same thing. When I read a book, I'll take the best of it and I'll ignore the stuff that's irrelevant to me. I don't have to go all or nothing. Finally, I want to introduce a framework that I've developed in the last few years, which has been really powerful for me. So I'm reading these online forums, and there's a lot of these software engineers, and they see marketers, and in general, they don't think much of marketers. They think, oh, these marketers are just scammers, they're just marketing people, they don't really have any real skills. And I always smile because I think to myself, some of the most sophisticated people I know, the best business people, have a very keen marketing mind. So I was reading this one forum one time where they say, email marketing seems like a scam. Why would anyone sign up for these emails? I hate getting emails. And I was just smiling because my entire business runs on email. I make the vast majority of my revenue from email, like so many of my peers. And yet, because they don't like getting emails, they think nobody else likes getting emails at all. And it struck me, instead of being derisive or really insulting, they should actually switch over to being curious, what I call the D to C model. In other words, if a lot of people are doing something, it's easy to say, oh, that's so stupid. Why would anyone sign up for a Groupon? That's so weird. Or you could say, hey, wait a minute. Millions of people have signed up for a Groupon, or millions of sites run email opt-in newsletters. I wonder why. It doesn't seem like anyone would do it because I don't really like getting emails, but I wonder why they're doing it. Let me sign up and find out. All of a sudden, you go from shutting yourself off to investigating something to saying, I wonder why they're doing that. When I was in Silicon Valley, a lot of my peers thought that brand advertising was total BS. So they'd say, billboard ads are worthless. Why would anyone sign up in Times Square and pay $1 million a day? And I looked at it and I said, well, there are companies that have existed for 70 years or 100 years that buy brand advertising every day in Times Square. Why? They probably know something that we don't. So D to C, derision to curiosity. Instead of being insulting and dismissive of everything, I actually want to take an approach that says, if a lot of people are doing this, they probably know something I don't know. So let me give you a few action steps for investing in yourself. First of all, blank slate. If you make $1,000 a month, just for easy math, what percentage of that do you think you want to invest in yourself? Is it 1%? Is it 30%? Now, what percentage are you actually investing in yourself? Just go through the last couple months. What have you spent to improve your own self? Is it books? Is it seminars? Is it events? Is it taking people out to coffee? What is it? So there's clearly going to be a dichotomy, a difference between what you want and what you're actually doing. Now let's get more tactical. What is one thing that you want to invest in yourself over the next 2 weeks? Is it a book? Is it coffee? Is it going to an event? Is it flying to meet somebody? What is it? Write that down. Now write down what you want to invest in yourself with over the next 6 months. Could be something bigger. Could be a much more expensive seminar that provides a lot more value. Could be doing more of one thing, like going out to coffee every single week. Next, I want you to write down what it's costing you to not invest in yourself. Remember how I told you my friend invisibly lost $200,000? He actually has no idea that he lost that. To him, they rolled out a mediocre product and they made a little bit of money and they thought, okay, we made this product. It wasn't super great, but it wasn't bad. What they don't know is if they had made a few tweaks, they would have actually made hundreds of thousands of dollars more. So just do a rough approximation. Just do a rough guess. How much is not investing in yourself costing you? Think about that a different way. let me add a little caveat. These ways of investing in yourself don't have to cost money, right? I have gone to conferences as a volunteer. I went for free, but I got to learn and soak up the knowledge and meet a few people. That didn't cost money. Sometimes it can be just going to an event that's free. It can be picking up a book from the library. It doesn't have to cost money. It may just cost your time. So remember, this is not about having 50 grand a year to throw around investing in yourself, but it usually is about some kind of cost: time, money, attention. So you've written down where you're going to invest in yourself over the next 2 weeks and over the next 6 months. You've also written down what it's costing you to not invest in yourself. This is a little foreign to us when we first start thinking about it. Not to you. You're in this program, so you already know what it means to invest in yourself. But when you start to make it systematic, when it's not just a one-off course, but it becomes a way of life, this can actually be one of the most powerful strategies you ever employ. Instead of letting your education finish with college, you realize that it's going to be ongoing. You're always going to be learning about a wide variety of topics and then going deep, deep, deep into the most interesting areas for you. Could be health, could be relationships, could be improving your career, could be the most esoteric thing of all, like woodworking. There's always material out there for you. If you invest in yourself, you can instantly stand out from everyone else who thinks it's too expensive. Isn't it funny that we go to college, we spend tens of thousands of dollars investing in a college education, and the day we graduate, we stop learning? Anyone else think that's weird? Yet the way I think about it is the world is abundant. There are millions of things we can learn. You want to learn about cooking, woodworking, whatever. You can learn about it. There are experts out there who would love to teach you their craft. Doesn't have to be expensive, or if you want to become the world's best, you can pay a lot of money. The cost is almost not the issue. It's the idea that you can seize the things you want to do every day for the rest of your life, not thinking of the world as a scarcity mentality, not thinking that there's only so much money and knowledge to go around, but instead thinking, I'm abundant. I can actually invest in myself, and it will be the best investment I ever made. That's the power of investing in yourself, not just for today, for the rest of your life. You ever hear people who are really dismissive of anything new or unconventional that they hear? I read this internet forum with a lot of software engineers on it, and they don't really think much of marketers. They think, oh, that's just marketing, and marketers have no skills, and they're always trying to scam people, which just makes me smile because I know a lot of marketers, and a lot of them are very good people. So at one point, there was this discussion forum about email marketing. And hundreds of people on this forum came out and said, email marketing is a scam. Why would you sign up for emails? I hate getting emails. I unsubscribe from everything and they still send me mail. And I smiled because that's ridiculous, first of all. I make over 90% of my revenues through email, and so do millions of companies. Okay, email marketing works, otherwise it would not exist. And yet, here were a few self-selected, angry people who, because they don't like getting emails, they think that nobody else likes getting emails either. What's going on here? I call this the D2C principle. It's easy to be dismissive of other people and other business ideas and other things. And yet, I would rather adopt a curious model. So it's easy to say, email marketing's fake, it's all scams, it definitely doesn't work. Or you could say, I don't really like getting emails, but all these sites have email opt-in forms all over them. I wonder why. What's going on? Why would they do that if I hate getting emails? Are there other people who do it? Are these sites just unsophisticated? What's going on? And then if they wanted to take it a step further, they could say, you know what? I'm going to sign up for a few of these and try to figure out what's going on. Now, this is incredibly difficult for people to do because they have to confront their own invisible scripts. Then they have to actually take action in a way that's opposite of what they want to do. Think about it. That person who hates email now has to sign up to get a bunch of emails? Not that likely. But this is the true way to become masterful at what you do. I remember when I was in Silicon Valley, a lot of my tech friends, they really think that brand marketing is BS. Brand marketing being billboard ads, things like that. They would always poo-poo these companies that spend millions of dollars in Times Square advertising. They're like, there's no ROI, you can't measure it. And I thought to myself, wait a minute. There are companies who have been around 100 years that are spending millions of dollars in Times Square. What do they know that we don't? And I realized in order to be world class, you have to put aside your dismissive tendencies and actually become curious, D to C. And as I learned more about brand advertising, I learned, okay, there's a lot of BS in it, but not all of it is BS. There's a lot we can learn instead of being closed-minded about what we do. All of us have this tendency. I do, you do, we all do. We get dismissive of things we don't understand. There's another really interesting forum I read on health and fitness. And people started writing, they said, hey, has anyone else had this experience? You finally start losing weight and your parents act really weird about it. And I started clicking it, and there were thousands of comments in this thread. And people said, yes, they've started getting really weird. And this is what they would do. So when you start losing weight, one thing that tends to happen is your parents will use these code words. These code words like, why are you getting so extreme about working out? Why are you getting so extreme? Why don't you just eat like a normal person? And it wasn't just one person that said this, it was thousands. So if thousands of people on an internet forum are saying this, chances are it's happened to a lot of people. I actually noticed a similar thing happening in my family. And what is going on here? What's going on is that instead of saying, hey, so you look great or you look really good, what have you been doing? Tell me about it. People will say, oh, so what are you doing? You're doing extreme dieting? That's crazy. Are you taking all that creatine stuff? So what are you doing now? It's going to ruin your health. Dismissive. But instead, what if they said, you know what? What are you doing? You look great. I'm curious. And they set aside their own barriers for just a few minutes and said, oh, okay, so tell me more about that. Oh, paleo, or oh, slow carb diet, or oh, how does this work? How do you think that would change things? Now, it's easy when you look at someone else being dismissive to say, oh, they just don't understand. And yet, how many of us do exactly the same thing when it comes to our careers or our relationships or any other part of our life? That brings me to my action step for you today. I want you to actually write down 3 things that you are dismissive of. Be totally honest. Could be marketers, could be email marketing, could be a certain diet, could be a certain person. I think they suck. Okay, write it down. And then I want you to switch from D to C, from dismissive to curious. I hate that celebrity. I think they have nothing to offer, and yet they're on TV 7 nights a week. What can I learn from them? How did they do it? Is there something that I could learn from that if my goal is to become more media friendly or more famous? What can I learn from them? What you do as you go from D to C is you start to separate things out. You say, you know what? I don't like email marketing, but really what I don't like is scammy over-the-top sales. Instead, what I like is messages that resonate with me. Turns out email wasn't really the problem. It was that I was signed up to the wrong email lists. Or when it comes to changing the way you eat, the first thing we tend to do is become really dismissive. Well, I can't cut back on bread. I'm Asian. I love rice. Well, actually, as you learn more about it, you say, how are all these other Asian people doing this? Oh, interesting. What I thought this diet was is actually totally different than what it actually is. It's really more of a lifestyle change, etc. And I can still eat what I love, but I'm going to change the quantity, etc. So I want you to list down 3 things you are dismissive of. It's going to be very hard because you're going to take those and you're going to go from D to C. I'm very curious to see what you come up with. It's kind of funny the way we treat learning a new skill, isn't it? First of all, many of us don't want to learn a new skill at all. And when we do, we create all these barriers in our head. Oh, what if it doesn't work? What if I look stupid? I'm an adult. I should already know how to swim. And yet, once we finally buckle down, once we finally say, okay, I'm committed to learning this skill, what do we tend to do? We tend to read a little bit, try to learn it on our own, and go through it all by ourselves. I want to share a framework that I started using many, many years ago that has dramatically accelerated the way I learn new skills. And it's not that complicated. It starts off by saying, number one, if I'm going to learn something, I need to do the basic research on my own, right? So if I want to learn, for example, how to monetize a blog, this is something that I did for myself. 3 years after I started I Will Teach You to Be Rich, I finally said, okay, maybe it's time to start earning a little bit from this. I want to understand how to monetize. I want to understand how to monetize this site. And the first thing I did was to go through all the different monetization models. How did I find those? I just started Googling earning money from blog, monetization, and I discovered there are 6 or 7 models. There was advertising, consulting, speaking, products, etc. So then, instead of trying to do all of those on my own, the next step was actually to find some experts and ask their advice. This is something that very few of us do. And yet, just by talking to one expert, you can save months, if not years, of wasted time. I'll give you an example. I had a friend of mine, actually a dream job test student, who one of her ideas was to become a business development person in Silicon Valley. Now, she was 22 years old, just out of college. She had no real functional skills, but she'd heard this phrase, biz dev, business development. So she really thought it was sexy. So I kind of smiled and I said, okay, definitely do your research on what biz dev is, and then I want you to go out and talk to 10 people. So she came back after talking to 10 people, and she kind of sheepishly said, yeah, I don't think biz dev is right for me. And I said, really, why is that? And she realized that biz dev is a real position, but really only once you're relatively senior at the company. Meaning you have a strong Rolodex, a strong network, you've perhaps even helped sell a company previously. But when you're biz dev in Silicon Valley at 22, it's largely a BS role, right? You're making cold calls and stuff like that. Not a good role, but she would have never known that had she not talked to 10 to 20 experts. In other words, she saved years going down the wrong path, all with 10 to 20 conversations. So think about that. 10 conversations with people you don't know. That can sound overwhelming. But what's more overwhelming? That or going down the wrong path for years? So that is my point. When you want to learn a new skill, when you're considering going into a new field, first, do your own homework. Get the lay of the land. But second, harness the free advice that so many people want to give you. Now, let me give you some more tactical material on how to do this. As you know, I've got many, many courses on how to write effective emails, who to reach out to, the word-for-word scripts to include so that they take your meetings, whether it's on the phone or even in a coffee shop. When you get there, here's something I want to teach you. I used to go in there and ask these really generic questions. What are the top 3 things that made you successful? Such a BS question. Let me ask you that right now. Answer my question. What are the top 3 things that made you successful? What's your answer? I worked hard. I set my priorities. What does this even mean? It doesn't mean anything. That's because I asked a bad question. So one thing I like to do is I like to write down my questions ahead of time, and then I try to imagine the answers. So if I say, what are 3 reasons you're successful? People are going to give you really generic answers. Oh, I have my priorities straight, etc. That doesn't help you at all. Scratch that question. Instead, I might say something like, what surprised you about this position? Okay, what am I going to imagine their answer is going to be? They'll say something like, I was told that it was mostly behind the scenes working on Excel, but what I didn't realize was that there are so many interpersonal skills that I needed to develop to become successful here. Is that interesting? Yes. I want to know more, so I'm going to ask that question. You see the point? So many of us go into these meetings without having thought through our questions. I will actually write them down the first few times I go in, and I'll go through that process. Is this actually an interesting question? Is the answer going to be interesting? If not, strike it. If yes, let it earn its way onto the page. The second thing to understand is that many masters of their craft don't actually know why they're masters. So you have to watch what they do, not just what they say. Malcolm Gladwell wrote about this in one of his books, where he talked about how tennis masters actually couldn't explain why they were so good. They would say one thing, but if you watch them on a slow cam, it would be totally different. So you do want to ask people, that's the art, and you also want to watch them blend the art and science together. So people might say, I had my priorities straight. And then you study their history and you realize, well, they were really at the right place at the right time. How did they get there? Because they started off their career in media, and the media led to an infomercial, and the infomercial led to them being one of the biggest bestsellers of all time. All right, so let me give you a little pop quiz. One of my friends, Michael Ellsberg, who I've interviewed for another program, he went from $8,000 a year to over $100,000 a year in just 4 years. If you were curious about how to earn more money, what would you ask him? What would you say? Write it down. Now I want you to go through that exercise and ask yourself, would his answers be valuable to me? If not, strike it. Don't worry, you will always be able to come up with more questions. Work through that exercise and you will find some very fascinating ways of asking effective questions. All right, now some concrete action steps. Our goal here is to figure out how to accelerate our learning for a new skill or a new industry. As we talked about, what most people do is they don't do it at all, or if they do, they try to do it all on their own. Instead, what we know is we're going to first evaluate the lay of the land, then we're going to tap the expertise of people who actually want to help us. So first of all, what are you trying to learn? Is it how to wake up earlier? Is it how to cook better? What is it? I want you to do your lay of the land research. Just Google it. Write down the main things you learn. This typically takes me a couple of days. I'll write down some patterns. I'll identify the big names in the market, and then I'll take it to step 2. If it's waking up early, I might just start off by asking a couple of my friends who do it really successfully. Note that if I'm trying to learn computer programming, I'm not going to email Bill Gates. That doesn't make any sense, right? He's way too advanced. I'm going to find someone who's 2 steps ahead of me. Okay? If you're trying to work out, you're not going to email Arnold Schwarzenegger. It doesn't make any sense. You're going to email someone who's a little bit more fit than you, or who has a little bit more discipline in going to the gym. Now, I'm going to expand my horizons. A lot of people get really nervous when I say talk to 10 to 20 people. It can feel weird, it can feel overwhelming. First of all, start with 2. Second, understand that you will truly start to crystallize patterns after 10 to 20 people. And if it seems overwhelming, remember this. 20 meetings may seem like a lot, but what if my friend had not taken those meetings? What if she had actually gone down the wrong path of biz dev as a 22-year-old and gotten stuck in a terrible job for 2 or 3 years? What's worth more? A couple of conversations that'll be awkward and then you'll get much smoother at it? Or 2 or 3 years of the wrong decision? If you're not sure what to say to these folks, I've got a number of programs that show you the exact emails to send. In fact, even what to say when you meet them in person. You can take a look at those. And finally, don't forget to close the loop. After you meet them, make sure you thank them. And even a couple of weeks later, say, hey, I really appreciate what you told me about Acme Corp. I actually went to speak to somebody there and they taught me X, Y, Z. So thank you so much. And I'll keep you in the loop as I continue learning more. This is how, instead of trying to do it all on your own, you can actually accelerate your growth, grow way faster than most people, and actually harness free advice that so many people want to give you. You know, the answer to your challenges is probably out there. You just have to ask the right questions. And this isn't a one-time thing. As we go through our lives, more and more we depend on other people. Our teachers, our mentors, our friends, our family. But one thing we often neglect to do is to actually ask people we don't know, but people who are masters of their craft, for advice. The truth is, if you walk in there with a genuine perspective, you show that you've done pre-work and you're ready to learn, most people would love to help you. They would love to give you their best advice. And what's most important about this is it's not a one-time thing. We do this for life. We know that there are people out there who can help us with anything. As we get older, we have different challenges. It's nice to know that we don't have to do it alone, that there will always be somebody out there who can give us advice. And most importantly, we build the skills to be able to identify who these people are, reach out to them, and engage with them. So instead of having to do this all on our own, we can tap into the resources of millions of people that are waiting to help us. Can you think about a time when you didn't value yourself? Maybe it was in a bad relationship. Maybe it was with a credit card company. Maybe it was with your boss. Think about how you felt looking back, saying, I can't believe I put up with that. Now think about an area that you don't value yourself in right now. Maybe it's walking into your boss and asking to be paid what you deserve. Maybe it's saying, you know what, I'm not going to put up with that. Why would anyone do that? I have other options. I want to talk today about knowing your worth. It's a really, really difficult and challenging process. And it's taken me many years to start to understand how I undervalued myself. I'll give you just a great example from my own experience. When I started off I Will Teach You to Be Rich, I didn't charge for anything. There were no products. I didn't run ads because I didn't want people to think it was a scam. I just didn't make any money at all. And that was fine. It was never designed to be a money-making venture. This was just my hobby. I felt like the world needed to know what I had to write. Well, over time, I was like, oh, well, let me experiment with some of these monetization models. This was about 3 years after I started my site. So I did a lot of homework. I studied ads and this and that. And I even asked my readers, hey, would you mind if I run unobtrusive ads? And 81% of them, I still remember this day, said, no, wouldn't mind. So I put some ads out there and it was fine. It didn't make that much money. But I slowly started to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe this is a business. Maybe this isn't just a hobby. And so one fine day in late 2006, I had put together this small ebook. I called it Ramit's 2007 Guide to Kicking Ass. I think if you Google around, you can still find references to it. And I put this thing together. It was beautifully designed by a professional illustrator. It had input from a ton of other big names. And I sold it. I sold it for $4.95. And I was just curious. I wanted to see, will people pay? How much? Will people join? But I was also petrified because for the first time, I was actually charging for content online. And it was terrifying. In fact, if you go and Google Ramit's 2007 Guide to Kicking Ass, you'll see the sales copy I wrote is horrible. It's full of things like, hey guys, why did I charge for this? You know, I know you probably could get a lot of this stuff for free, but and it's just horrible. It's full of a lack of confidence. You can just see it oozing off the page. And indeed, people complain. In fact, so many people complained and said, you've jumped the shark. Oh, I see I Will Teach You to Be Rich is just about how you can get rich. All my worst fears had come true, right? All these people who had been reading my site for years for free were suddenly calling me a sellout. And yet, despite that, despite the horrible feelings that I was experiencing, I also noticed a lot of people buying it. 20, 50, 500, over 1,000 people ended up buying that thing, even with a very unsophisticated copy. And I realized, wow, I feel horrible. It took me over 2 years to get over that horrible feeling that I was now somehow selling out. But what I also realized was that was a loud minority. And there's also people who are willing to pay for value, right? So the emotional experience I went through was very gut-wrenching. And now when I have people who come to me and they say, Ramit, you know, I'm making $20,000 from my blog. How do I take it to 100 or 100 to 500 or 500 to a million? I say, okay, I can help you do that. But you have to prepare yourself mentally to go through a gut-wrenching experience. For example, a friend of mine just emailed me. We actually talked on the phone recently. She told me she has a list of approximately 30 or 40,000 people. And she's never created a product. They have a different model. And she said, I want to do products. And I sketched out approximately how much she could make based on my knowledge. And it was a pretty considerable amount. It was several $100,000 in the first year. She got very excited. I said, well, you can do it, but I want you to prepare yourself that it's going to be gut-wrenching. The first time you ever try to sell anything to this list, they're going to hate you. They're going to call you a sellout. They're going to unsubscribe. You're going to get all kinds of angry comments. Are you and your team ready to prepare for that? And for most people, they're not. It's easy to go through life simply saying, I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to try to get into that college. I'm not going to ask for that raise. Because it is so intensely uncomfortable for us to try to get things that we, quote, shouldn't ask for. And in fact, we concoct all these interesting psychological responses as to why we shouldn't do it. We say things like, if my boss really valued me, he would know the work I'm doing and he would recognize me for it. Does that sound familiar to anybody? And yet, that's not the way the world works. You are entitled to what you ask for. Let me say that again. You are entitled to what you ask for. No one entitled you to a raise without asking for it. No one entitled you to a lower rate on your credit card unless you ask for it. No one entitles you for a better relationship unless you set boundaries and you abide by them. Think about it. You know, it's weird how often we reject ourselves without even trying something. I remember when I was applying for colleges, you get all these idiosyncrasies that people come up with when it comes to college applications. And one of my favorites was, oh, I'm not going to apply there because I could never get in. And even if I got in, I could never afford it. And I thought to myself, you're right, you can't get in because you just rejected yourself. The key principle here is this. Let them do their job rejecting you. Don't reject yourself. If you don't apply, by definition, you do not deserve to get in. If you don't apply or call your credit card company and say, you know what, these rates are way too high. I need to negotiate these down using chapter 1 of Ramit's I Will Teach You to Be Rich book. If you don't do that, you don't deserve to get a lower rate. Why should they just give you one on their own? They're making plenty of money without you calling. We're natural appeasers. We're conflict avoiders. Conflict is seen as a bad thing for a lot of us, right? Why do you have to have conflict? Just let it go. All these code words that our society teaches us, our parents teach us, our teachers teach us. Then we concoct even more and more fanciful reasoning to avoid conflict. We'll tell ourselves, I don't need that. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. I'll just let it go. Indeed, we create these extreme reach barriers. Remember those? Those are barriers where you assume the worst so you don't do it at all. For example, an extreme reach barrier of fitness is, oh, so in order to lose 20 pounds, I have to work out 7 days a week at the gym for 2 hours a day for the rest of my life? That's an extreme reach barrier. The same thing is true for avoiding conflict. We think that managing conflict means we have to barge into someone's room, kick down the door, throw something on the floor, say, you did me wrong, and then ruin our relationship forever. But that's not dealing with conflict. How many times do you know people who are highly skilled at conflict management? They walk into a room and say, you know what? I just wanted to talk to you. I have to be honest with myself. I want to be honest with you. I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but there was something you said and it made me feel a little uncomfortable. And I hope it's okay with you, but I just wanted to bring it out in the open so we can talk about it. Very different than the idea that you have to slap someone in the face and then scream at them. Okay? That's an extreme reach barrier, a psychological defense mechanism that we use so we don't have to do something that's uncomfortable. We also hate being perceived as greedy. This is another defense mechanism we use. For example, we'll say, it's fine, I'm just lucky to have a job in this economy at all. When really, you're being underpaid by $18,000 and having one conversation would make it very clear how much you're worth to the organization, but because you're not worth it to yourself, you're absolutely not worth it to your organization. So, what can we take away from knowing our worth? The first thing is that this is not easy. Some of these things are so deeply ingrained in us that it is incredibly difficult to get over them. I made it a systematic point to try to know my worth by creating amazing material, charging for it, and charging $4.95. I recently charged $12,000 for a course. To go from $4.95 to $12,000 took me over 5 years of extremely difficult, challenging work. And I'm not just talking about creating courses. I'm talking about mental work, psychological work, to be able to get over all of my hangups, my internal securities, and to be able to say, you know what? I know what I'm worth. It may not be worth $12,000 to everyone, but I know it's worth it to just a few people. And I don't need everyone. I just need the right people. So what can we learn from these lessons about improving our self-worth? The first thing we can learn is you can't win if you don't ask. Don't reject yourself. When you don't ask, you make it very easy for people to say no. Second, ask in the right way. This is what a lot of my programs involve. Scripts, body language, exact techniques when you meet someone. Because if you walk into your boss's office and you say, excuse me, I was thinking maybe I could somehow possibly one day get a raise, the answer is no. But if you walk in, you're confident, you've got your 30, 60, 90-day plan, you've got your portfolio with you, your briefcase technique, it's very difficult to say no to someone who's that prepared and knows what they're worth. And finally, destroy the tendency to create extreme reach barriers. Managing conflict or asking for what you want doesn't mean you barge into a room, kick it down, slap people, and scream. Asking for a raise doesn't mean you have to throw a sheet of papers down on your boss's desk and say, give me money. That's not what it means. You can be humble, but firm when you ask for these things. Again, you don't have to walk in and yell and scream and put on a big scene. So your action step for today is to identify 3 areas where you undervalue yourself. These are typically things like relationships or careers. But don't just stay at the surface level. When you say relationships, what do you mean? Say, I tend to be attracted to people who do X to me. I tend to put up with people who do Y to me. I do this because Y. Be crystal clear when it comes to your career. I don't ask for a raise, even though I know I'm underpaid by $18,000. Why? I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of having to prove my worth at this company. I'm afraid of X, Y, Z. So I want you to list off 3 things where you chronically undervalue yourself, but I want you to go deeper. Examine exactly how you undervalue yourself and why. Doing this exercise alone took me many, many years to be brutally honest with myself. And when you can shortcut that, when you can take a lot of the lessons I've learned, you can dramatically accelerate your own growth and your own mastery. What's your reputation among your friends and your business contacts? How would you know? Have you ever thought about what your reputation actually is? For most of us, it's incredibly difficult to find this out. And in fact, most of us don't want to ask, because what if it's bad? How do you go about fixing a reputation? Or in fact, how do you go about building the right reputation? I want to tell you about a friend of mine who I was having dinner with a little while ago. And we were sitting at this restaurant, we're having dinner, having a bunch of drinks, and we're just chatting. We're friends who both run businesses, and we always like to know what's going on and the latest gossip and this and that. And he said, hey Ramit, what do you know about this guy? And you always want to be cautious when someone just says something as broad as that. Oh, what do you mean? And he said, well, we're thinking about acquiring his company. And I said, okay. I said, do you want me to be honest with you? And he's a good friend of mine. He said, of course. So I told him, I was very honest. I said, listen, this guy is extremely arrogant. He's been very unhelpful, and he did a couple things that I didn't think were right. My friend said, oh, really? And we talked about it a little while. And the next day, I got a text message. The acquisition is off. Now, this person will never know why that happened. He'll have no idea. He'll never know that in the back room of some restaurant over drinks, this random guy who he hadn't talked to in a year or two said something that caused an acquisition to be scuttled. He'll never know. And that is exactly the power of reputations. They can go one way or they can go another. On the positive side, I recently interviewed my friend Michael Ellsberg. Now, this was a guy I wasn't really familiar with. And one day he emails me and he mentioned all these other people he knew who were really high-level friends of mine, Tim Ferriss, Noah Kagan, etc. You know, when I get an email like that, I send a quick note to somebody like Tim or Noah. I say, is this guy legit? They say, yeah, he's definitely legit. You should hang out with him. I ended up going to coffee with him. I ended up becoming a really good friend with him. And now when someone normally emails me and says, hey, Ramit, can I have an hour of your time at a coffee shop? While I wish I could, I just don't have time to do that, especially if I don't know them. But his reputation was so powerful, it preceded him. And so when I did a quick little check, it came back double thumbs up. And so that is an example of a positive reputation. It opens up doors where you ordinarily would not be able to reach. So let's go back to you. What is your reputation? Think about it. What would you say people would say about you if you asked them completely anonymously? Have you ever thought about it? The reason this is so important is that the more and more advanced you get in your career, the more and more reputation matters. Now, let me be really clear. The more and more advanced you get, the more reputation matters, and the less your technical skills matter. Think about that. When you're young and you're early in your career, the way you do pivot tables in Excel really matters. Your formatting in Adobe InDesign really matters, okay? But as you get older, what happens? You become a manager of people who do that. And so it becomes about your decision making. Do I trust this person? Do I like this person? Management consultants have a phrase they call the airport test. That means if I got stuck in an airport with this person, would I enjoy it or would I want to kill myself? That's the airport test for management consultants. And that's one big way they determine who to hire or who not to. So this is very radical for a lot of people to hear because it implies that your technical skills are not the most important. And that is absolutely correct. At a certain point in your career, it's assumed that if you made it to this level, you have those technical skills. You know how to edit video, you know how to write, etc. At that point, at these advanced levels, it becomes, do I like this person? Do I trust this person? Do I respect this person? And so if you can get a head start now by strategically building a great reputation, you are light years ahead of the game. Time is going to go on. You're going to get to those advanced levels of your career. And unlike other people who have just started to cultivate their reputation, you are going to be way ahead. If you don't do this, you can be floating along and one day invisibly hit a brick wall you didn't even know existed, just like happened with that young guy. He has no idea why his acquisition was canceled. He'll never know. But invisibly, around him, something happened based on his reputation, and it dramatically altered the trajectory of his life. Whereas, let's say he'd had an amazing reputation, or you meet someone else who has an incredible reputation. They're able to network with high-level people. They're able to leapfrog other people because their reputation is so good that they get doors opened up. That's what's called a discontinuous jump. It's not like just a gradual jump. It's actually a huge jump going to the next level. In other words, not from 1 to 2, but from 1 to 5 all at once. So, how do you do this? I'm going to give you a few action steps, but I want to be really clear about this one. This is a much more cerebral framework, okay? This is not, hey, do these 3 things and send out this email script and your reputation will be amazing. It's quite different. Building a reputation, especially a positive reputation, is a years-long endeavor, and it actually never ends. So the first thing you can do is try to figure out, what is my reputation? Most of us don't even do this ever because we don't want to hear the answer. We never think about it. What you could do is simply this. Take a piece of paper and write down the answer to this question. If I were to ask 3 of your best friends, what's his or her reputation? Talking about you. What would they say? Now remember, this is going to be completely anonymous, so they would be brutally honest. Now what if I asked 3 people at work, what's his or her reputation? What would they say? What are the positive things they would say? Always gets things done on time. Very proactive. What about the negative things? This is really difficult. You're going through this 5-minute straitjacket technique. You're trying to understand other people. And to imagine people saying negative things about you is really, really challenging, but you're going to do it anyway. Maybe they'll say, he talks too much. He's overbearing. She's not very confident. What are some other things they could possibly say about you? You want to write them all down. The truth is, we know a lot of the areas we're weak at, okay? Some of us are too overbearing. Some of us interrupt too much. Some of us are really poor listeners. We know some of these things. So if we can just apply this technique, we can actually write these down. We can acknowledge these are things that are affecting our reputation. Next, we've got these things down. So we've written down, I interrupt too much and I'm not a good listener. What are 3 things you can do over the course of the year or stop doing that are going to dramatically change these issues of your reputation? For example, if you interrupt too much, what is one thing you can do in your next conversation? Force yourself not to interrupt. Be conscious of it. Be cognizant. You could go even deeper. You could say to your friend, hey man, I have a problem. I know that I keep interrupting people and I want your help. It would be really cool if next time we hang out with John and Mike, just give me a little look or a little nudge if you hear me interrupting. It's okay. I want your honest feedback. I'm not going to get mad. Now imagine you do that with 3 things and you do it on an ongoing, systematic way. So every month you have a little calendar check-in. You say, how am I doing on interrupting people? Now remember, you're not just picking out things you want to get better at. These are things that are going to dramatically affect your reputation. So these are also going to turn into much deeper things later, like he's trustworthy, she's reliable, they're prompt. If you can start off simple with some simple traits like listening or interrupting, once you deal with those, you'll have the confidence to move on to the higher level issues of improving your reputation. Again, this is one of those things that is not obvious. It's not obvious why your reputation matters today, but as your career continues growing, it will become more and more important that your reputation opens doors for you, not closes them. So I want you to start thinking about this now, years before other people hit that invisible brick wall. Imagine 2 people going to ask for a raise. Person 1 walks in there and says, boss, I'd really like a raise. Boss says, why? Person says, I've been here a couple of years and I work hard, I show up on time. What's your answer to that person? Get out of my office. Or we'll talk about it later, the budget doesn't support it right now. Person 2 walks in, says, boss, I'd like to discuss that raise that we covered a few months ago. We discussed what it would take to be a top performer. Here are the things I've done since then. I'd like to take a look. And, as we discussed, I'd like to discuss a compensation adjustment. What's your response to that? You're certainly more likely to give that person a raise. I learned a very fascinating technique from one of my mentors, BJ Fogg, and it doesn't just relate to getting raises. It's actually related to so many other things that have helped accelerate my business. And that is to keep a portfolio. Always keep a portfolio of amazing things you've done. Now, a portfolio is typically associated with a designer, but that's not true at all. Everyone should have a portfolio, and I'll share a couple of examples of how I do it. For example, we keep an optimization portfolio of all the tests we've ever run optimizing our business. Could be our website, could be our email marketing, whatever. I have no use for these optimization tests right now. But I know that one day, I may create a product on optimization. And so at that time, 70% of the work is done. I have all the content right there in that portfolio, and I can walk in and say, let's build this product. Now imagine how that feels if you have that same portfolio for something you've done really well. This is why I say everyone should have a portfolio. Imagine you're at work. You're keeping track of any win that you've had. So you helped improve sales on the website 3%. You take a screenshot of what was before and what was after. Add it to the portfolio. Let's say that somebody at work says something really nice to you. Ramit, I really admire you and I love working with you because whenever you say you're going to get something, it's always there on time. Print that out, put it in the portfolio. Now at this point, the portfolio is just a very loosely organized scrapbook. It doesn't have to be some formal folder. It doesn't even matter. All you have to know is that one day you may need this material and it will be right there waiting for you. Now, the key is to collect this along the way, because if you don't, you'll be too lazy or it will be too inconvenient to do later. And I think we can all acknowledge that's true. If I were to say, hey, go back and find a list of accomplishments you've done in the last 6 months, we don't even know where to start. But if we've been tracking it all along the way, it's really easy. Just pull open that folder. Done. Now imagine someone who does this for 3 years versus someone who doesn't do it at all. The person who tracks all the nice things that people have said about them at work, maybe their fitness wins, or even their workout schedules, maybe any accomplishments they've done with the website or a marketing campaign they run. Compare that to someone who doesn't. What's the difference? Not only at this job is it going to be easier to get a raise, if and when you decide to switch jobs or even industries, you're going to pull that portfolio out, done. It's very, very different, and it's a whole different way of thinking. Now, I'll add an additional tactic. It's nice if you can work this into a systematic perspective. So once a month, you set 30 minutes on your calendar and say, add material to portfolio. So every month, you don't have to think about it because it appears right on your calendar. And you say, you know what, okay, 30 minutes. All I have to do is look over the last month, put it into this folder. By the end of the year, you have at least 12 pieces of amazing material you've done right in your portfolio. Again, you may not know exactly how to use it today, but I think we can all see how this would come in incredibly helpful 2 months, 6 months, 18 months from now. When you take this simple approach, you're head and shoulders above everyone else, because there's almost no chance for people to retroactively create their portfolio. It's really, really hard. So here's my action step for you. Do you have a portfolio? If not, I want you to create a simple one today. It could be a physically printed folder. It could be a bookmarking service. It could be a folder in your email. Doesn't matter to me. Next, what do you have that you've already done that you can add to it? I just want you to add one thing, because I don't want it to be totally empty. It's like a tip jar at a bar. You know, bartenders are very smart. They always add a little bit of money in there to get it seeded. I want you to seed your own portfolio. What's one thing you can add to it? Something you did that worked out really well. A testimonial from someone else. Whatever it may be. Then, I want you to ask yourself, every 3 months, can I add something new to this? Add that little notice to your calendar. And if you think that in 3 months you're not going to have anything to add to it, you might have a deeper challenge, which is, am I actually doing enough valuable work at this company? If not, maybe this suggests that you need to ask your boss for a new project, or you need to proactively go out to lunch with other people and see how you can help other parts of the company. Or maybe you need to get a side job. If you are not being able to fill up that portfolio at least once every 3 months, that's a big red flag. But if you know that every 3 months you're going to be able to fill up this portfolio, bulging thick with all the new things that you've accomplished, if you know that you can do this regularly, then you will know that you will have an unbeatable edge over almost anyone else. This portfolio technique is one of the most important things you can do, because instead of telling people how great you are, it actually lets you show them over and over and over again. Try it out.